Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. Quick reminder, Amazon affiliate on the heyhumanpodcast.com front homepage. If you click on the portal for Amazon and go shopping at Amazon like you normally would, it helps support Hey Human Podcast, which is a wonderful thing. Also, rate and review Hey Human on iTunes. The more it gets rated and reviewed, the more likely more people will hear it, which is, of course, the ultimate goal of a podcast. Keep sharing it with your friends and family and coworkers. Help spread the word and the love. Social media, Hey Human Podcast on Insta and Facebook. And I'm on Twitter, Susan Ruthism, so you can find me there. And yeah, heyhumanpodcast.com, of course, as you know, is the website. And you can always email me, susan@heyhumanpodcast.com. Love to hear your thoughts. Love to know of anybody you think I might want to talk to, that you think is interesting, has a cool story or a weird story or whatever. Yeah, bring it on. All right, so on this episode, I had the delightful experience of speaking with Wade McCollum. We were over FaceTime because I think he might have been in New York at the time. He travels around a lot for what he does, which is he is an actor and a director and a composer and a writer and a really fun, funny, sweet man. I've had a delightful time speaking with him. And of course, for links to some of the stuff we talked about, will be on heyhumanpodcast.com on the links page. Yeah, that's what I got. And so thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy, and wherever you are, much love. Here we go. Hello, Wade McCollum. How are you?
Susan Ruth. I'm fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. And you're in New York currently?
I am looking out the window in Queens where I live. It's lovely.
And it's super cold and snowy and dreary?
It's actually bright and freezing.
Oh. Yeah. I like your toque, your hat.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, this is a Van Wild original hat. We went and got this together. Yasmina.
Very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
And that is how we met, was through Yasmin.
Yeah.
She's awesome. She's great. She's a lot of energy going in every different direction. It's fun.
It's so true. She is a creative powerhouse, to say the least.
Super fun. So she connected us for various reasons, but I'm fascinated by your story. It's so interesting. You are an award-winning actor, and not just an actor, but an actor, because you do Broadway. You're theater, which I think I've always felt that theater is so much different than movie. I think about that, like if I were going to be, my nose is running. How embarrassing. It's cold here too. If I was going to, I feel like TV, for example, filmed a lot of times in front of a studio audience. I mean, I guess a lot of them aren't, but the comic ones, the stuff I'm drawn to are. And then movies, you've got somebody that could probably give you lines. When you're on a stage in the theater, you have to know everything inside and out, and that seems terrifying to me.
Yeah, there is an element of terror because anything can happen. I think that's part of the dynamism of live performance in general, whether it's theater or a concert or whatever it might be. The audience and the performer know that anything could happen.
Yeah.
And I think that it fuels a dynamic type of performance that does not necessarily exist in film or TV. However, I would argue that good film and TV tries to capture that same danger or spontaneity. Difference being obviously that it only has to happen once. You don't have to sort of recreate it over and over. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm drawn to the scripts of films where you can tell the directors and the writers let the actors do what they want, have more room to be spontaneous. But are you allowed that spontaneity in a play? I would imagine not.
It depends Depends on the play, when you're doing like Wicked on Broadway, no. Like, it's a machine. There's tons of people and, they're always replacing people. There's always, swings. There's universal swings that fly from city. There's 9 productions of Wicked. So there's universal swings that fly from London to Australia to New York to just understudy the choral part. So they'll just come in and you meet them. Maybe sometimes I wouldn't even meet the person and I'd be acting opposite them. So the consistency is pretty darn important because you're acting opposite people you might not have met.
Wow.
And there's like 8 people in the show. It's ginormous. So out of necessity, some of those larger, long-running Broadway shows, they need to run consistently, and you need to stay on your mark and do exactly the same thing basically every night. However,
and still make it look in the moment, which is also a feat of ingenuity.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's really the craft of theater acting, right? Is you have to memorize everything, your pattern, and get it down, and be able to replicate it. But then the craft of it is infusing after you've done it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, maybe for years, is still infusing it, even though you do it 8 to 10 times a week, with the fact that it's happening for the first time every single time. And that is the craft, is kind of getting yourself in that innocent mind space where, what's coming at you and what's happening, what's coming out of your mouth has never happened before, even though it might have just happened at the matinee that afternoon.
Yeah, it's really intriguing to me. So we jumped right in. Let's go backwards a little bit. Let's start from little Wade. When you were a youngin', did you always want to go into theater and movies and that sort of thing? What was your progression? How did you get there? Why? All those good questions.
That's a great, yeah. It's complex, of course. I was born into rock and roll. So my dad's a drummer. Oh. And so they had me while they were on the road. And they just basically decided to take me along. And so for the first 5 years of my life, I didn't stay. There was no house. And 2 weeks, 3 weeks was about the longest we stayed in one place. Yeah. So I sort of got to know my world as sort of a North American gypsy. And
what rock band? And can you say what band?
Yeah, I mean, I Foolish Pleasure when I was first born, and then Tracer was a band that he joined when I was about 3.
Okay.
And bar band basically all over North America, Canada, and the States, and a lot of one-nighters. Sometimes a week or 2 or 3 week long gig, but mostly just one-nighters or weekends. And so that's how my dad made a living. And so in terms of making a living as an artist, that was obviously demonstrated to me. And in terms of playing music, it was just everyone around me was always just playing music and just picking up instruments. So I never had this idea that you had to learn an instrument. Though I know that, one obviously must. As a kid, I just sort of would pick anything up and play it. So I have this sort of musical propensity based on just living around a lot of rock and roll when I was young. So music was sort of inherent and sort of a baseline. And then I was always very theatrical and very strange and sort of found my way into the theater. We moved to Ashland, Oregon, and I know you are from Seattle.
My parents used to take me to the Shakespearean Festival every year in Ashland. It was the best.
So the short answer is that's why I'm an actor, because I went to school in Ashland, Oregon, and they came into our middle school and they were like, that guy's weird. And so I started writing plays and one-man shows and started seeing things at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Then they ended up teaching our high school drama class, and it was so clear to me once I did my first play with Kirk Boyd, who is the Associate Artistic Director of Oregon Shakes. I was about 14 or 15. We did a play called A Company of Wayward Saints by George Herman. And I had been sort of a national debate champion. I'd really liked speech and debate. And I'd never done a play yet. I'd written a lot and sort of, like I said, been very theatrical and done a lot of monologues, but had never done a play. And auditioned for this play, got into the play, and it totally transformed my life. It was sort of a typical first show kind of story, but once I did it, I thought, oh, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, obviously. And so I dropped out of high high school and went to a performing arts conservatory and graduated when I was 19. And I've been a professional actor ever since. And because of the music has sort of been a bed underneath my acting the whole time. So I'm always writing songs and composing and so forth and so on. But that's sort of how I came to the theater. And, not to go on to wax too long about it, but it came at such a critical moment in my development, as I think it does for many, where I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with my life, and I was pretty despondent. And the theater and, my personal life was sort of in shame. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of drama.
As a teenager, you mean?
Yeah, as a 14, 15-year-old, there was just lots of drama, and it became my refuge. And it was really a saving grace for me, and the community that I found in the theater and the creative fulfillment I felt both through the medicine of being in a play and also what I felt the audience was receiving from the work we were doing. It felt so completely, profoundly healing on all fronts that I thought, there's nothing else I want to do with my life. This is what I want to devote my life to. And so in a way, it sort of saved my life and then infused the rest of my life with a lot of purpose. So
it's an incredible communion to be on stage and to have the audience looking up at you and that flow of energy. It's really indescribable, but a communion is the closest word I can come to the feeling of it.
Yeah.
So being shaped by creatives, had your parents not been creatives themselves, do you think you would have gone in that direction? Or do you think there's something to be said for the fact that you were surrounded by it? Because a lot of times, people end up Alex P. Keaton and their parents are one way and they go absolutely 100% the other way.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to tell. It's like nature versus nurture kind of conversation, and I feel like I came in the way I came in to the world, and that I had sort of a prescriptive energy and a creative soul, and so I do believe that no matter what the sort of outpicturing of my familial situation was, I would have found my way to the theater or to some sort of expressive creative art form, because it doesn't seem like a choice to me, and it doesn't seem like I was nurtured to be that way. Though I would say there are things that creative things like picking up a musical instrument and playing it without having to know how, that just sort of came easier perhaps because I was raised by creative people. So I think it's both, and it really seems like kids come in the way they are, and the parents, it's sort of like neither here nor there. They'll sort of hopefully find their way to their destiny.
Yeah, I agree with that. Your parents, I assume, were okay with you pursuing the dramatic arts?
Yeah. They absolutely supported me in myriad ways. I think, like any parents, they were concerned with practicalities, will this make a living? Will he be okay? And that's, it's a legitimate concern. I still have that concern for myself.
Yeah, every creative does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like we get into these fields because we think we're going to be super. Most of the creatives I know, at least, it's not like it's about the money. It's not. It's about you can't not do it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
So that first play you stepped on stage, was it a big part that you auditioned for when you were a teen, or was it a smaller part?
Yeah, it was a small ensemble play. So I think there was maybe 8 people in it. The narrative was distributed pretty evenly throughout the 8 people, and it was a commedia dell'arte piece, so which is sort of like an old Italian improvisational comedy form. And so there's these sort of stock characters, and I played the Capitano, which is sort of this, he's typically a soldier, has a lot of bravado. His comedy comes from, he's sort of Trump, actually. He's got a lot of self-important ego inflation and needs a lot of attention, and his comedy comes from the sort of overblown self-importance, and then
like an Oscar Wilde character or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And then his sort of sadness comes from a feeling of isolation and loneliness, and his regret in terms of the suffering he's caused through war and such. So it had both elements. It was very funny in the first act. It was very, very dramatic in the second act, and it was about a community of actors putting on a play for the Duke, and so it had the play within a play sort of situation. And yeah, it was so profound. I don't think there's any way I can really describe how profound it was. All I know is that it motivated. I'm much older now. So for the past 20 some odd years, it's all I've devoted my life to because of that. And it really was that magical healing thing that brought that on.
Do you think since teenagers are developing at such a rapid rate and they're mirroring at such a constant rate with everything around them, trying to figure out who they are and what they are, and then if you add acting into that mixture where you're constantly being someone else for a set amount of time, like a month long of being this other person, do you think that creates a switch in the brain that makes you maybe a little bit more multiple personality than regular people that aren't actors? Because you have to become, it's almost like you have to allow your own true personality to vacate.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. There is a practice of emptying out and allowing the characters to sort of drive for the duration of the performance or rehearsal, allowing the character to sort of drive the action. Though I would say a lot of acting is drawing on personal experiences too, so it's sort of a strange amalgamation of the two, sort of drawing from your own authentic personal experiences, deep personal experiences, and then sort of cross-applying those through empathy and compassion and imagination to somebody else's circumstances. So, their life might be completely different from my own. And in fact, I really love playing characters who are very, very, very far from my own life experiences. And that beautiful challenge, the craft of an actor, bridging your own personal life with somebody else's imagined life and bringing that character to life through sort of combining your empathy for their life and also things in your own life that do relate deeply to perhaps what they've experienced. And then, in that is sort of this dynamism of transformation. And as an actor, I'm really most interested in transformation. There are some actors, and this is neither bad nor good, it's neither here nor there. There are some actors who are more interested in sort of acting from a place that is similar to their own nature. And I think a lot of film and TV actors have sort of figured out a way to really authentically embody characters that are very close to their own way of being, and that's awesome too. And I do enjoy that, but I feel as an actor, I have a lot more fun if I'm transforming into somebody who, let's say, is like a 90-year-old hermit who lives in the Antarctic woods. I mean, I really like the exploration of something far from my own experience, and it's fun to do all the research. I've played like a biochemist, and I got to do all sort of biochemistry research, and so I signed the Declaration of Independence in this play called 1776, and so I got to do all of this sort of research on early America, and every project comes with its own sort of beautiful array of research and empathy and exploration and imagination.
What a great career for a curious mind.
Hallelujah, that's a bumper sticker.
Do those characters then in turn, especially, I'm of the belief you never stop growing and challenging your mind and your personality and all these things, and you're constantly being informed. Do the characters you play, or even the characters you're playing around the other people, have they shaped you as a human being in general?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They become, characters for me become friends, they become allies, and sometimes in the case if they're an antagonistic character, sometimes they can play an antagonistic force in my own psyche or whatever, but but for the most part, I find that I befriend them, and they do, they become like a song. You say one can craft a song, and it becomes a part of you, and you work on it and you perform it, and it becomes a part of your own personal narrative, and it also, may inform the choices you make in the future based on what you learned through crafting and performing that tune. And I feel similarly about characters that, because it's a craft of embodiment. So, you're taking on the essence and the being of another character. And so, yeah, it's going to deeply inform your perspectives, and it does. It shifts and hopefully makes one more empathetic. That to me is the greatest invitation of the act of the craft of acting is empathy and compassion. Of course, entertainment is good too, but yeah, and then there's also, in terms of does a character inform your life and all of that, there are times where I've returned to characters. I played Hedwig in The Angry Inch.
So good.
Like tons and tons of times. I did it in Portland and in Ashland and in Los Angeles, and I just did lots and lots of productions of that in my 20s. And that character really, really, really greatly, profoundly informed and impacted my life, and brought me so much abundance and so many gifts. And it was such a great universe to be in, because it was rock and roll, which my childhood was so infused with, and it was, this incredible gender exploration, and just a really kick-ass, complicated, bizarre, amazing, catalyzing story. And so that story, I got to do many, many times. And then other characters I have had, like Shackleton, which I just did here at Second Stage in New York City off Broadway. I've done like 4 or 5 productions playing Ernest Shackleton.
As in the Shackleton Adventure?
Yeah.
That's one of my all-time favorite books, is his diary.
Oh my gosh.
I know there's a couple different versions of that book by different people, but the one with the ship on the cover, I read that like six times. Yeah. The Endurance.
It's such a good book.
Oh my gosh. It's in my top 20 of all time. It's a fantastic
so I just did this 2-person, you'd love the show. It's a 2-person musical with Shackleton and a modern day Brooklyn single mother composer, and he comes through her refrigerator and takes her on his journey in Antarctica.
Oh my God.
And it's quite incredible, very inventive. And if you want to watch it, it's on BroadwayHD.com, and they just put it back up.
Is that the one with you in it?
Yeah, they did a 7-camera shoot. There's like crane shots. It's really well shot. The sound is really good. And our cast album is coming out at the beginning of February.
The story of Shackleton's journey is mind-boggling. His capacity to manage the situation is extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's really a feat. To read it, it's so triumphant reading that book.
Yeah.
Yeah. His descendant, Emily Shackleton, is a hit writer here in Nashville.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, and I when I met her the first time, we don't really know each other. When I met her the first time, I said, Shackleton, not a normal name, right? I said, Shackleton. I said, are you descendant from the Shackleton, as in the Endurance? And she just sort of, yeah, like no big deal. And I'm like, oh my God, I totally fangirled, because I was not the music. I didn't care that she was a hit writer. I was so excited that she was a descendant of him. It's incredible.
Yes, he is a remarkable soul. And speaking of how a character informs one's life, I'm naturally optimistic. It's just who I am. I always have been. But his optimism, it really takes it to a whole other level. And, just playing him really showed me how whiny I can be about stupid shit, it's so cold or whatever it might be.
I think about that stuff a lot. I think about our grandparents or our great-grandparents, depending what generations they were in, and the things that they endured. For example, my grandfather, he passed away when I was quite young, but his his journey, and he died, he was 100 and something. So he'd been around a very long time, and he escaped Russia as a young boy. And the journey that he endured in that as a 17-year-old, he spoke like 11 languages, and he had to be able to become anyone at any given point, because if you didn't, you could be killed. You know, and he had stolen papers, and he ate his shoe when he was hungry because there was no food, and his shoe was made out of leather, and like he wrote all these letters to my eldest brother, or my older brother, about the experience. And I often think, if that were me today, I'd be like, no, go, you know, or maybe not. Maybe the beauty of reading a book like The Endurance, or knowing about these people like my grandfather or whatever, is that humans really truly are resilient, and we will rise to the occasion.
Yes.
When pushed.
Yes.
But there's one of my other favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
And, you know, he talks about being in the concentration camp, and how Viktor Frankl, and how some people died and some people didn't. And the one thing that was the difference was the concept of hope. And, you know, you think about all this stuff, and how many times, depending on your belief system, have we endured the things and come back and tried something new? And it's just fascinating to me. And you're so lucky, because the concept of reincarnation is fascinating to me. I personally believe in it. It makes sense to me. But then I also look at one's life, a singular life, from birth to the headstone. The amount of times we reincarnate within that life, singularly, speaking. Yeah. All the different people we become, and all the different jobs we might have, or, just all that stuff. It's fascinating. And you get to do that all the time, which is so cool.
It is so cool. I feel so lucky. I really, every day I'm like, this is my job.
It's so extraordinary. And Wicked is when I went to see Wicked when it came here to Nashville. First of all, I had no idea that there was roving casts like that. That's so cool.
Yeah, 9.
It makes sense. But gosh, they must be extraordinary actors in their own right. They could bounce around like that.
Yeah, those universal swings. I've never encountered anything like that, where people go from company to company and play. They're understudying 20 some odd parts, each of them, in 9 different companies. So they have to know 9 different tracks of 25 different people. And and everyone is nuanced in a different way because of the theater that it's in, so forth and so on.
I imagine them being in the middle of Wicked and saying, "Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him." Everybody looks like, "Wrong play."
Yeah.
Wicked. When I went to go see Wicked, speaking of that communion, I sobbed. My then boyfriend, we broke up a long time ago. He took me to see it, and he looked at me and said, "Why are you crying so much?" And I said, "I'm Elphaba," But that's the thing. It's we are you, you are us, you are the characters are us. It's this grand, beautiful circle of connection. It's so cool.
Yeah, it really is. And doing that show every night, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, at the Gershwin Theater, it's a ginormous Broadway house, and every single time the show happens, people flip out, and the response is just overwhelming. And every time we did it, even though it was hundreds and hundreds of times, for me personally, every time I got out there, all I could think of is like, all of these young people, especially young girls, watching this incredible musical about empowerment and a feminine rebel who is shirking authority and saying, "No, I have an ethical compass, and I understand what is right and wrong, and I'm going to stand up for it despite what the collective is doing." And the bravery and the courage, and I think I couldn't get over how incredible the story is, and how much it was impacting people and empowering people, especially young women. And that to me is just like, what could be more cool and more important than that? And you have a great time while that's happening. Awesome.
Yeah, and it's very funny, and on top of being moving, it's the writing is spot on.
Yeah, it's an exceptional piece, and it deserves all of its success. It really does.
how hard is it, and I'm sure this has happened, and of course you don't have to name names, but how hard is it when you are under the direction of somebody where you just artistically, bam, bam, not seeing it, not feeling it, and you have to soldier on. It's your job. It's like all of us have had a bad boss, but I feel like in the theater it's that much more intense if you have a director where you're just not meshing. Have you had that experience?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, over 25 years of doing it, you can imagine there's been lots of circumstances where I don't necessarily resonate with a director, or I think a director is sort of off base in terms of what my opinions of how the show or the character should go. And the cool opportunity in the theater, at least the way I look at it, is I've made a life choice, and I made it very early on, that everything is happening for a reason, and that it's about perspective. So what could potentially be a really challenging thing, yes, it might be challenging, but it's the perfect thing. It's an opportunity. It's the perfect opportunity to become more compassionate, to find a compromise, to maybe go in a direction that like my ego says, this isn't what I thought was best for the play. Maybe it's about exploring what I think is a dumb idea. And maybe through exploring it, I find out that it's not at all, that it's actually this unexpectedly brilliant idea, and that my judgment of it was standing in the way. Or maybe it really is a dumb idea, and by doing it, everyone, maybe even the director's like, wow, that was kind of a dumb idea. So I feel like, or maybe not. Maybe the director loves it, and I have to do that dumb idea every night, and that's just okay. Like, it's temporary. Nothing lasts forever. And it's also hard to tell from the inside when you're an actor. Part of your job is to sort of be myopic. It's to look at the small pieces, the breath. How do I breathe and get from this moment to this moment? It's like, as an actor, we are the interstitial pieces of a grand narrative arc. And the play, the big picture, we should be, in a way, we should be unaware of it, because we're just one little character in this much larger story. Even if you're the protagonist, you're still only aware of what you're aware of. Whereas the director's role in the theatrical world is to hold the big picture, is to sort of have every piece in mind, including the technical objectives and all of that. So there might be something that director is saying to you that sounds so off base from your very myopic interstitial perspective. But when you kind of zoom out and look at the larger picture, it actually might have an internal logic that you weren't seeing because you are necessarily so focused singularly. So, there's lots of ways of looking at it. And then sometimes, egos. There's lots of egos in the theater and in film and TV. And, sometimes you just have to deal with outrageous characters who just do silly shit. And part of it is just patience, I think.
I always find it so ironic that so many actors, and when I say actor, I mean female and male. It's my understanding that encompasses all.
Yeah.
So I find it ironic when actors have these grand egos, because to me that seems like it would convolute what they're trying to do to get out of one's own way to become this other person. It's literally the opposite of ego. So where does that disconnect come from? And especially if they're playing characters who are heartfelt or are empathic or are lovely or tyrannical for that matter, and they don't see their own tyranny within that, I find that fascinating. I guess I feel like actors get that sort of rap of, oh, they're all crazy because they're playing so many different characters and they're all full of ego and all this stuff. But I can't imagine you can go through your life being these people and not, as we were talking about earlier, take on those traits or have them inform you. So how come there's so many ego people? But I guess that's just the way it is. The ego is the ego,
Yeah, I mean, there is the actor's ego, and then there's also the character's ego. There's
a lot of people in there.
There's a lot in there, and there's also the audacity and the courage and the craziness that it takes to get. We started out talking about the terror of live theater. That it takes such courage to stand up in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of strangers and basically cross your fingers and hope that everything goes well, and that the story gets told and that you hit all the notes if it's a musical, that you do the split if it's a dance show, that whatever it is you're trying to attempt, your fingers play all the notes on the keyboard or the guitar, you practice and practice, but anything can happen. And so I think the ego is a fragile animal, right? And it takes a lot of personal gumption to get up in front of thousands of strangers and do something that could go off the tracks. And so I think that, there are actors who have a healthy relationship with that, which it's not necessarily ego, but it's courage or gumption in order to get up and do it. And that sometimes could translate into sort of an overzealous courageousness in their normal life, where that sort of self-importance, like, look at me, see what I can do, kind of energy that it does take to get up and do that.
Yeah.
Sort of, they don't leave it at the stage door, that it sort of goes into their everyday life, and that, there's neither a wrong or right. It's just sort of, how we sort of deal with it's almost like a, what do you call it? Like a career, like a risk, that every job has its risks, right? Like, like any sort of work, if you're working a forklift, there's danger involved. And I feel like one of the dangers or, pitfalls of this career is, managing a relationship with your ego and the courage and gumption it takes to get up in front of strangers. And then also, if your character is an asshole, sometimes you can just be an asshole. Like, it kind of augments your own assholeness. And so for a period of time, I've played some really awful people. And yeah, during those runs of those particular plays or that particular TV show, there are people in my life who are like, I didn't want to be around you because you were just acting like an asshole. And, that's also part of the craft, is like learning how to let it go. And as a younger actor, maybe I didn't have as many tools in my toolbox, or as many experiences to figure out how to shed the ego of the character and allow my own sort of personness to come back in everyday life. And especially in film and TV, that shit can read your mind. It's like, I feel for people who act in film and TV a lot, because there is a sense in that medium of beingness rather than acting, that the embodiment.
It's well said.
It's like, yeah, and the line between self and character is often a lot more blurry in film and TV, because you have to be thinking as you're, it's really about the inside world of the psyche of the character. So there's this sort of potentially dangerous merging that can happen.
And you get the really method actors, which I don't know, it sounds like you have that element to you, but I know that in film, certainly many actors, they will stay in their character throughout the entire filming and never. Yeah. Did you see the Jim and Andy documentary?
I did just watch that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's a great example.
Yes.
Exactly what I'm talking about, and there are a lot of people who are like, fuck him, I don't want to be around him, he's fucking crazy.
Even his friends, they're like, this isn't Jim, this is Andy.
But you get this outrageously incredible performance. Right. Daniel Day-Lewis, another example of like, just method to the T. Mm-hmm. And it yields extraordinary work.
It's a great sacrifice. A lot of times mentally, physically, again, it's one of those crafts where I think blithely people go and they watch a movie and they spend their $12 and they eat their popcorn and they're like, that was a great film, but they don't understand the toll that it likely took on the people performing and all around, of course. It's not to say that, everyone from the gaffer, which I technically have no idea what that is, but I love the word gaffer, from gaffer to director to actor, that everyone's playing their part, but that the toll that it takes emotionally. If you think about it, like me going through my everyday life, let's say I have a meeting with someone that I don't particularly like, but I have to do the meeting because of whatever, my job requires it. So I go to the meeting and I smile and I am pleasant and I am kind and I am all those things. And I leave that meeting, I'm like, fuck. And the emotional fortitude that it takes for 1 hour, imagine now transferring that through an entire 3-month film project. It's got to take its toll.
Oh my Lord. I mean, yeah, it really is hard to describe. And of course it depends on the role and the situation.
And the actor, I'm sure.
And the actor, yeah. I did a film many years ago where I played a very good human being who was trying to save his girlfriend from schizophrenia, and because he needed to stay up to do his research, he ended up getting addicted to meth. And it was out of this sort of loving impulse, but then he sort of became this monster, and his life sort of fell apart. And the period of the film where we were shooting the scenes where I was super crazy crunky, it was so intense. And like, I've never done meth. I would not do that. There is no redeeming quality to that substance in my universe, but he did. And so I had I ended up fasting for like 5 or 6 days. And then on the day of the shoot where I was doing all the crazy stuff, I just ate a handful of chocolate covered espresso beans. And because I hadn't eaten anything in 6 days, I went completely bonkers. And we got great stuff, but it took me months to get back to just sort of maybe it changed me forever, it just sort of, it showed me a part of my psyche that's like, something I never thought was there. And, there is a toll that I think that certain characters can take on one's life and all of that, that the audience doesn't necessarily have any idea is going on. And that's okay, And that character, Gary, he's a part of me. He's a part of me that I I sort of am not necessarily always wanting to hang out with, but he exists, and that's okay. So yeah, it's a very strange career, and it's got its beauty, and it's got its hardship, like any career.
So how do you prepare, other than not eating for meth characters and things like that, but and overdosing on caffeine, which seems like a good way to go? How do you? Is there an overlying way you prepare? Obviously, each character is going to require its different preparation. You already spoke to the fact that you research whatever motivates that person. I've heard many actors talk about they create backstories in their minds, or sometimes the writer of the play or whatever already has done that for you. But how do you go about it, and how the hell do you memorize all those lines?
Yeah, it is different with each process is different. I would say that for me, it's about 90% imagination, sort of exercising the muscle of my imagination. And that is probably why I cannot stop doing it. I love it. I love using my imagination, and I love exploring, a whole other universe of life experiences that these other characters that I'm playing, what their life has been like. I think it's really interesting, and it feeds all the other work I do as a composer and as a songwriter too, and as a playwright. So I would say it's mostly imaginary in terms of the work. And then, of course, there's lots of reading. If you're playing a historical character, then you can, like Shackleton, I read as many books I could read about him to just see what people said about him, what he said about himself, what he said about his own experiences. And that has a wealth of things to sort of spark your imagination and to guide your imagination. And so that's fun when there is a lot of sort of historical record to research. Mm-hmm. And then if you're playing a completely fictional character, then I like to do research around their world. So like, say they grew up in Detroit in 1960. I need to know what that was like. And so I go and watch movies that took place or read books that take place there. And the littlest things can spark the most extraordinary elements of a performance. Like, we're just remembering, like, oh, they had this big glass ashtray on their coffee table that was just filled with cigarettes, and people were just constantly smoking, and this thing was overflowing. I don't know why that image just popped into my head, but it seems pretty accurate in Detroit in the 60s that there could be this overflowing ashtray. And then, like, what that sort of, how that that little weird detail can sort of guide you in all sorts of different directions about how this person might walk through the world, their needs, wants, and desires, and their quirks and quandaries and all of that. So that's that. And then in terms of how does one memorize lines, you know, I've done shows where I have very little to memorize, and I've had a very hard time memorizing it when there's like not very much. And for some reason that can be really hard for me. And then I've done one-man shows that are 2.5 hours long, 45 different characters, 16 different German regional dialects, and, you know, playing 12 different people on one page, and they're all talking to each other, and it's just me on stage. And you know, for that show, I recorded myself saying all the lines, and I would listen to it constantly. So I was either reading, studying, or listening while I was brushing my teeth or making dinner, just listening to myself. So you know, you kind of create a feedback loop in order to memorize quickly. But every actor has their little, you know, their little secrets, the way they memorize lines.
When you're writing a play, is it hard to write the play from the mind of a playwright versus the mind of an actor? Because I imagine it's a difference.
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah, I think that's so funny, and I might just be realizing that now. I think as a writer, I fall into the trap, because I'm a practiced career actor, I fall into the trap of, I get seduced by the characters, and I follow one track maybe too focusedly. Man, I don't even know if that's a word, but like,
Sounds
you know,
it's
not a word. I feel like, yes, a playwright's job is much like a director's job in that one must look at the big picture and how all the pieces fit together, how all the characters fit together.
The
and then I think
is the god.
Yeah, the playwright is creating the universe of that play. And so I think, you know, the playwright, now that I'm saying this, it's quite daunting. I think the playwright has to be an incredible actor, because they have to get inside the deep psychology of every single moment of their character and motivate everything that comes out of their mouth. They must, and that there are no sort of arbitrary choices for a playwright. It must be guided meticulously, and good playwrights, I think, are highly intelligent, and and have to look at the small picture and the big picture and have it all fit together. And that's quite a feat, man. I have such deep respect.
Yeah, and I think like August Wilson is a great playwright. I love August Wilson, and I think about that too. You know, that in some cases, as you begin to write the play, it must be too that the characters themselves start taking over, and they say, no, I want to do this, and you as the writer have to say, okay, well, fine, you know, or no, you don't get to do that. It is very Greek mythology, you know, kind of the pulling of the strings, and
it is, yeah. And whose agenda is it? Is it the playwright's agenda? Is it the character's agenda that's being fulfilled? Is the character an archetype? You know, is that character pulling from energy beyond just their own psyche? Are they some sort of, you know, collective unconscious thing that does want to be articulated in a certain way? So as a playwright, you're just the servant of their agenda? Or are you, you know, specifically channeling these characters into a specific pattern to tell a certain story? I guess there's different methods, you know, different ways of writing, and holding that container, the playground for all those characters. And and it just sort of depends. If you're creating something brand new, it could go in any direction. You know, if you're creating something based on something, then, you know, you have to kind of sculpt it according to what it's based on. And so I think it's just
film I recall seeing. I'm almost positive it was Emma Thompson, who I adore, and I want to say it was Jim Carrey, but it probably wasn't Jim Carrey. It might have been somebody else. I don't know why he comes to mind. Maybe because we were just talking about him. But where a playwright was writing in the play, and they were in real life behaving. And they didn't even understand why they were behaving the way they did, but they would behave whatever the playwright was writing. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah. Is it called Stranger Than Fiction?
That's it.
Yeah.
Who was in that with her?
I can't remember. Brr. That's a great movie.
It really is. Will Ferrell? Maybe it was Will Ferrell. Could be.
Could be. That's a great film. I think I watched that on a plane from LA to New York.
It's a great film.
It was
and
great.
And a fun concept, and not unlike, the Plato, of yesteryear, where the gods are imparting their will, and poor mortals are like, what's happening? Why am I doing this?
Yeah, and then like the whole, like the Hedwig in the Aristotle story where Aristophanes, where the humans get too powerful.
Oh, we just lost your voice.
Oh no!
There you are. You're back. You're back. Okay, Hedwig. Now what? Now?
Well, like how in Hedwig, the origin of love story, where the humans get too powerful and they challenge the gods too much, and so Zeus splits them into two.
Yes.
And that, I love that story.
I do too. I love all those stories, and they certainly explain a lot about human nature, don't they?
Seriously.
The philosophers of yesteryear really knew what the hell they were talking about.
It's so true.
They didn't have, Instagram getting in their way. They could think about things. All right, so the most cliche question to ask in an interview. What has been one of your favorite characters to play? What character are you aspiring to play that you would really... And a favorite play and or playwright? Big questions, but sort of cliche questions. But I'm always fascinated by what, Yeah.
I mean, I have a really hard time with superlatives. The favorite and the best and the most. I've always had a hard time with it. Because when I'm doing something, that's usually my favorite thing.
Sure. I understand that completely.
Yeah, it could be my optimistic spirit or whatever, but I just feel like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then the next thing I'm like, no, this is the coolest thing ever. And so I have a great amount of enthusiasm for the project I'm currently working on, where I'm playing this sort of old rock and roll. I mean, old, he's 40 years old, rock and roller, and it's a 2-person brother-sister rock musical. So I'm having a great time sort of delving into that and learning a lot of really complex guitar parts, and getting inside his universe is really fun. But in terms of past characters that I've played, I would say Shackleton is at the top of the list. For numerous reasons. It was a really amazing play to be a part of. I got to sing my face off. My co-star was incredible, and the character, that's a human being I could explore for the rest of my life in terms of his optimistic spirit, his leadership qualities. I would never get tired of embodying that and exploring that character. Hedwig in the Angry Inch. Hedwig is also
so good.
So incredibly complex, and for the longest period was definitely my favorite thing.
It's such a beautiful story too. Just rip your heart out. It's so beautiful.
So beautiful, and just for innumerable reasons, that play I think is one of the best things I've been a part of, and really did. It was just incredibly profound. So I really love that character. Things I want. I've gotten to play. I read Angels in America when I was like 14 years old. I read it in the bookstore in Ashland, Oregon, Bloomsbury Books, and I cried and freaked out and couldn't believe that this play existed and that this character prior existed. And when I was 14, I thought, I want to play that part. Like, that is something I must do. And I've sort of carried that with me until the year I played Dracula, actually, in Indiana. 2011, I got cast as Prior in Angels in America, and my soon-to-be husband got cast as Lewis. And so we played opposite each other in this play that I'd wanted to...
Before you met, or you had already been betrothed?
We had met, but we'd been together for some time.
Okay, got it.
We had not gotten married yet. Okay. So it was just this extraordinary dream come true for me, in terms of cast and character. So that was very fulfilling. Other characters I want to play. I mean, my passion right now is new work, is creating new characters. So there are lots of characters in the canon I could sort of rattle off that I would like to play. But if I'm being completely honest, I'm much more interested in originating parts and working with the playwrights and composers on crafting a new human, a new character. And And that is what I'm doing a lot of. So a show that's going to London next year that I'm going with is I'm playing Carl Tanzler, this extraordinarily strange scientist who has this remarkably bizarre tale that has become sort of famous. And so I'm originating that character, and then this guy that I'm playing, this rock and roller. So mostly new work, I think. And then I can't remember the third part of your question was something, and I can't remember.
I think it was a play that you wish to be in, or even a film. I guess we've concentrated more on the play aspect, but I'm good with either if there's any character specifically. But you kind of answered that by saying you're drawn more to the new folks that haven't been created yet.
Yeah, I know that's not necessarily a satisfying answer. And in terms of film and TV, that's the same thing. I feel like I want to be, I've been going in a lot for, series regulars on a new television show. So I'd be part of sort of creating and crafting the original, this character. And that's really exciting to me. And the medium of TV, in terms of there's just such a wealth of content right now, and really good television content, long form narrative stories being told in these really creative and extraordinary ways. And I think a lot of exceptional writing is happening on television, and I really love the format of doing a different episode every week, so it's never the same thing twice, and constantly learning something new, and also in that newness every week, crafting a performance for the camera that it is ultimately spontaneous. And that really excites me. And so I feel like that's, right around the corner in terms of next career stuff.
Do you have a preference for comedy versus dramatics? I can't remember who said it, that death is easy, comedy is hard. Is that old saying? Do you know who said that originally? I'll have to look it up. I can't remember.
I don't.
It might have been Goldie Hawn, or probably somebody way before her, but I seem to think of it being attributed to her, because she's a comic genius, and having to play these ditzy, spazzy whatever characters when she's obviously not that. And I imagine to be able to sort of let yourself go to that extent it's not easy. Comic timing is not easy. I do too.
I have a story about her. I ran into her at a juice bar in New York at Westerly, and and she ordered a juice. It was probably, it's Manhattan, so it was exorbitantly expensive. It was probably $14 for her thing of juice. She tipped the guy $40 in cash in the cash jar, and he had no idea who she was. And I thought, you know what? That is absolutely incredible. Awesome. I just love her.
Yeah, I love her too. I just talk about a spirit. Her spirit is beautiful. I just rewatched The First Wives Club. So much fun.
Nice, yeah.
At Christmas time. How can people find you?
Should
they be able to? You're on socials and stuff.
I guide people to whatever project I'm working on through my website, which I call Wade Song, like singing a song, wadesong.com. And that has some of my music and my albums and the musical that I've been working on. And I usually, if I'm remembering to, I update it with whatever project I'm currently working on and where it is.
I'll put a link to it, wadesong.com. It's not plural, right? Just song, S-O-N-G?
Just one song.
One song. One long song.
Hopefully it's long.
Wade, you're a delight, and I'm so excited to meet you in real life, which I know is coming somewhere down the pike, although we'll be two ships passing in the night when I go to New York, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll get to see each other in real life soon.
Maybe in Nashville, because I'll be coming to do some recording very soon. So.
Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate it.
You too, Susan. You too. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great. And all the luck in the world. Break a leg, as they say, and safe journeys and all that good stuff.
Thank you. Ditto. You're incredible. You're absolutely incredible.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.